tonight we welcome Margie Beaton, President of the Mabou Gaelic and Historical Society on Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia, Canada. And I was lucky enough to meet Margie at the Society Museum this summer as part of our Canadian Tartan tour. So welcome, Margie. I've been excited to speak to you, having heard a little bit of your story in person, so I'm very intrigued to find out more. I know that you're originally from the Hebrides, but which island was it that you actually grew up on?
I grew up on the island of Eriskay in the Outer Hebrides, Edinburgh. So I spent my younger days there until I had to move away for high school and university and eventually work. But I still call it home.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And obviously the Hebrides are where much of Scottish Gaelic literature and music has historically originated. So did you always grow up with Gaelic as your first language then?
I did, yes. We didn't speak much English at all. We heard English in school, but once we went out to play or leave the classroom, there was no English.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It was always Gaelic everywhere.
Yeah, and then so you said that obviously you had to move away to high school even. So yeah, can you talk me through even how that experience must be slightly unique?
Yes, well, I left when I was 11. I had to leave when I was 11. And unfortunately, I was sent to a boarding school in the south of Scotland, in a place called Girvan, which was run by nuns. And you go from a small island where you know everyone and you've got the freedom of the island. And all of a sudden, you're in this one building with probably more people than were on the island. And you're restricted in movement and there was no freedom left. And after being on Eriskay, it felt like a prison.
Yeah. And then so from there, did you always stay in the mainland then, or did you always want to go back?
Well, I always wanted to go back. There's no doubt about that. I went to Glasgow University after that, and then Jordan Hill College of Education. And when I finished there, my intent was to go back to the islands and teach. But unfortunately, in the 70s, there weren't many opportunities with Gaelic, teaching Gaelic. Geography was my other subject because I loved the landscape and everything else to do with geography. And it was curiosity because a lot of the men from home were sailors and traveled worldwide. And we always heard of these exotic places like Rio de Janeiro, Singapore, and everything else. So between the landscape and hearing about all these places, I was always interested in geography too. So I couldn't get work in the islands. That was the long and the short of it. There was no work available. And I had been offered my first day, I think it was, at Jordan Hill College of Education. Jake MacDonald, who was my Gaelic lecturer at the time, he asked me if I wanted to go to Canada to teach. And I said, oh my goodness, this is my first day here. I don't know how teaching, and I will get along. So maybe ask me later in the year, towards the end of the year.
Oh, wow. So you didn't even really get much of a chance to teach in Scotland straight away. It was always straight to Canada then. Wow.
Straight to Canada, yes.
Yeah.
So of course, at the end
of the year. So then when you went to Canada.
So at the end of the year, Jake MacDonald did ask me again, said, well, have you made up your mind? And I said, made up my mind about what? Well, are you going to Canada to teach, to Cape Breton? And so then I just weighed the pros and cons of it all. A job had turned up in Tiree, and I said, will I go to Tiree? Will I go to Cape Breton? I said, well, it's only for 2 years. I'll go to Cape Breton.
There you go. So so it was like a fixed term sort of contract initially then.
Yeah, it was for 2 years originally.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. So like one of my questions was going to be, had you always wanted to move abroad, or was it just too good an opportunity to pass up? But I guess it sounds like it was just fate almost.
It was almost fate. I did actually want to go abroad, but it was to work volunteer service overseas, I think it was. There. So they call it here, but I think it was VSO over in Scotland. So I'd always wanted to do that. So I had been hoping to get my permanent contract license, and which took 2 years at that time in Scotland, and then go traveling. So this was kind of a shortcut. I went traveling right away. I came here. Right.
Absolutely. So. And so then once you arrived, was it that you were just there to teach the Gaelic language, or were you teaching other subjects but in Gaelic also?
Well, when it's a long story, but trying to cut it short, when I first came, it was Gaelic, and I had 3 schools, so I was traveling from school to school, 20 miles apart, and I had no driver's license at the time, so I was out on the road hitchhiking for the first 4 months of my year. And so I did that. I got my driver's license and bought a car, and so I was on the road, winter roads. My first winter was when I first started driving, and snow and ice and everything else. Shock to my system to see all that. But anyway, I did 8 years of traveling. Then there was changes in the education program here, and they cut out a lot of what they called frills. And at the time, some of the schools considered Gaelic an extra. And music, art, drama, all that was cut out too. So it wasn't just Gaelic. So it was a decision made by the Department of Education at the time. But fortunately for me, the Mabou Gaelic Historical Society that you mentioned in the beginning fought to have it kept in Mabou, and they were successful in doing that. And it's pretty well always been in Mabou since then, since 1972 till the present day.
Yeah, fantastic. And so how did it feel to make that move then? I assume, obviously, thinking it was just the 2 years, you did it alone then, headed off.
Yeah, it was very different, and it was exciting and interesting. I had really no idea where I was coming. And when I heard I was coming to a place called Mabou, I looked it up in an atlas, tried to find it, and did find it. Notice it was very, very small dot on a on a map, and trying to find, couldn't Google it or anything like that at that time.
No.
So it was hard to find any information on it. And basically, it's just a small village. But when I got here, the people were so Gaelic. They were just like the people I left behind.
Yeah.
In their ways, in their thinking, their religion, their music, dance, everything. Yeah. And their way of life. It was so much like the islands in coast of Scotland. And the only way I can describe it is that it was like another island, even though there was 3,000 miles between us.
Yeah.
Next parish, if you leave from the west coast of Scotland, you'd eventually come to Cape Breton. So it was just like I got lost. So it was full of Gaels. I felt quite at home that way. The only thing I missed was the young people. There were a lot of young people, just like in the islands, had to leave home for work. And it was the same situation. So there was lots of older people and lots of younger people, but none really at my own age, in their 20s, 30s at that time. So that was missing. And I missed a lot of my friends from college and university when I first came.
Yeah. And I suppose having had to leave home at such a young age, though, then that probably helped prepare you for such a move like that.
Yes, you were always leaving. I just feel that my life has been, a series of leaving, But you're always leaving. And it started at 11 and has been going on ever since.
Absolutely.
Never gets easy.
No, I can imagine. And so obviously you spoke about, already when you went there, so much of the culture had kind of made its way over there. And so had any of your own ancestors, further back made that journey before you had?
Yes, some to Cape Breton. Some of them I have uncovered and found, and there's probably lots more there. I uncovered one branch of my own family, the McIntyres, and they were known as the Gardner McIntyres from South Uist. And 2 brothers of that particular family had come to Cape Breton, and their descendants are still here, and we've met up with quite a lot of them. I was here a good 7-8 years before I discovered that they were there. It was actually one of them that found me.
Oh, really?
And said, do you know anything about these people we've tracked down to Eriskay? And of course, it was my father's people. So I said, oh, we're cousins. Probably something that's kind of unique there too, kind of uncanny, I guess. When I arrived in Halifax in Nova Scotia, my plane was late arriving, and I got held up in customs and everything else to get my paperwork in order. So I missed my last flight to Cape Breton, which was to Sydney on Cape Breton Island. But somebody, a Gael, like, the Gaelic grapevine was working, and a Gael actually met me at the airport, and I was very glad, and had changed my flight to Sydney and all this, so I was well looked after. So only years later, I found out that he was one of the McIntyres. He was actually a cousin that met me. And of all the people in Canada, a cousin met me my first day here.
Yeah, that's
unbeknownst to him and I that we were actually cousins at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, and I'd heard so many times, that it was so like the Highlands and the islands of Scotland, but until I actually came and saw it for myself, it's even just some of the landscape felt so familiar. It's something very special.
Yeah, very like parts of Scotland, but definitely not like the Outer Hebrides, where on Edinburgh we had 2 little trees and that, but here.
Oh yeah, there's trees everywhere.
Of course, my house is up on a hill. I'm not in amongst the trees because I felt the trees were choking me. I needed to see all around me. So I built a house up on a hill where I can see for miles around. So.
Oh, sounds fantastic. So are there any other elements of Gaelic culture that had also travelled to Canada that you feel like have sort of become their own culture separately, or are they still very similar to Scottish culture?
Oh, there's lots. Just everything was so like Scotland in many ways, but it had its own unique flair also. Like the dancing and the music, the fiddle music, the piping, and the storytelling. When I came here first, it used to really bother me that they used to talk about Scottish music. And although it was very similar to the Scottish music we had in Scotland, there was a difference in it. And to me, it was Cape Breton music. And I kept saying, why don't you call it Cape Breton music? Because it has its own style. Although many of the tunes were the same tunes, but they were played a little differently. And it was definitely the fiddle was the main instrument also, not accordion that I had been used to. But the pipes were very much to the fore also.
Mm-hmm.
And the dancing was step dancing rather than the Highland dancing. Although they did have that too, but they had their own kitchens. It would be step dancing. They would be doing the old style step dancing, which I guess goes back to Scotland. Although we associate it more with Ireland, but I guess it was in Scotland originally too, although we didn't experience it. So that was a little different too.
So a real blend of some bits that you recognised and some that were quite different then.
Yes, yeah. Not so much different, but just adapted and just unique to the place in a way, with definite ties to Scotland in there.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And so I read, obviously, you said when you had been at college and then they had asked you about coming to teach in Cape Breton. So I read that the Gaelic language instruction programme began in 1972. So that started in just 7 schools as a pilot programme in Inverness County. And this year then marks the 50th anniversary of the programme beginning. So I can only imagine the impact that that's had in the last 50 years. So can you tell us a bit more about that? Because you've been there for quite a lot of that that time.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we're pretty excited to have reached this milestone of 50 years now. We still have the program in the schools and that it has expanded throughout Nova Scotia. And I think we have 12 schools now, including high schools and feeder elementary schools where it's being taught. When I first came here, well, I taught for the first 8 years, it was all Gaelic I taught, and then it started throwing in other subjects with that. So we really had to fight our way to keep Gaelic in the schools. And I give credit to the Mabou Gaelic Historical Society for doing that, for keeping the fight going over the years. So up into the 90s seemed to be a time when being Celtic was cool certainly throughout Canada, United States, other parts of the world. So we kind of rode that wave and took advantage of that and pushed for more Gaelic in the schools. And we got ourselves an Office of Gaelic Affairs in the province, and we started trying to get what do we call it, Cornell na Gaelic, the Gaelic Council for Nova Scotia, and eventually got it into the Office of Gaelic Affairs in recognised by the Nova Scotia government. And so we were getting more established all the time. So having it in a school in Mabou for all those years, it kind of kept it going for the rest of the province to springboard off it when the opportunities arose. That was really important to us. And I guess the crowning glory now is that we have in the community also a Gaelic immersion school, which started. It's in its second year now.
Oh,
so
wow.
We're really, really pleased. Hope that will continue to flourish and grow. So that's our aim right now.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, and I can only imagine how many children in those 50 years, then have learned. And I'm sure you mentioned when we met in person that you've even had people that you've taught there in the island that have then come over to Scotland to teach. So that's quite the role reversal.
Yeah, we have a few that we've lost to Scotland, unfortunately. We're now teaching in schools in Scotland when we could do with them here too. But it's great that they're able to do that. And some of them came through the Gaelic program here in Mabou. We're also happy to see in Mabou that you can do your first year university based on here in Mabou at the satellite campus of the College na Gaelic, and is tied in with Cape Breton University. So any student from anywhere in the world can come and do their first year of university here in Mabou, and it's based on the Gaelic literature, Scottish history, Cape Breton history, culture, language, and things like that. So that's kind of exciting for us too. So that will be starting next September.
Oh, wow.
So I hope that having Gaelic in the schools for the last 50 years, that has helped bring all this about in some way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And well, even just seeing it, for example, go on to, the app Duolingo and stuff like that, I think it's really raised kind of popularity. And just, I feel like as a child, I'm from the Lowlands, really it wasn't really spoken here, but I did go to a Gaelic nursery when I was very, very young for a small amount of time, and I have no idea why my parents sent me there, but I can remember the odd word from them. But then the rest of my life I've grown up never thinking about it again until the last few years, and it feels like even here in Scotland, now it's on some of the road signs and place names, and people are kind of embracing it again, it feels like. So it's nice to see that both here at home and over there that people are kind of keeping it alive.
Yeah, and it's on the road signs here now too, which is very good.
Yeah.
We're happy to see that. And it's not necessarily translations either, but the names that the Gaels gave to the different communities.
Oh,
for example, Mabou, the translation, it's not a translation of the name Mabou, which is a Mi'kmaq word, but it's Androchach, is what the Gaels used to call, say, Himi you ek Androchach, I'll meet you at Androchach, when the village started to develop. So it always, with Gaelic speakers, it was never called Mabou, it was always called Androchach. So, and of course, our museum has that name too.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yes. Obviously, we mentioned about the Gaelic instruction program beginning in 1972. So then it was only a few years later that the Historical Society founded. So that was 1975. And then since 1980, you've owned and operated the museum. So obviously that's all very much tied together. So I guess the museum is kind of the main focal point for the society. So what is it that people can expect to find when they come and visit the museum?
Well, we always considered it to be a living museum. And what we meant by that it would be a place for the community, and they could come in and use it at any time if they needed to gather for whatever reason. But we're there to promote the language and culture. So we often have lessons in dancing, step dancing, Highland dancing, fiddle, piano accompaniment, piping, and so on. So we try to encourage the youth as much as can be, and to have them in there. And any youth programs we have at the museum, we never charge for the building. That's to promote and develop that. And when they're in there too, they can see some items from the past, artifacts from the past, a good library of Gaelic books and English books. And of course, lots of information about things that happened in Mabou in the past, historical archives. And we also had many of our students have done interviews over the years with local members of the community. The school and the museum work together quite a bit. Okay. So we have a good collection of interviews and research that was done by our students in the schools, which are very valuable to us today, because some of them go back to the 70s. Yeah, so some of them go back 50 years, in other words.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. To think, to get the students involved, and that only adds to the museum and, like you say, the records there of the community. So it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're busy there. We're always busy there.
Yeah. So, and is that sort of the main type of events that the society hosts then, is sort of those educational programs?
Yeah, we have people in giving talks on various subjects, or it might be on something to do with Gaelic. It might be to do with the bards of the area. It might be to do with the Dutch community that came here post-war. So we try to bring in other cultures too, not just our own, or on the Irish and of the area. So we try and be open to everybody, to all cultures at the museum, because it is a community museum.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so obviously you're the president of the society. So what does the role of president entail then?
I thought I could kind of take the load off a little bit by setting up committees. So we've got a Gaelic committee, a history committee, historical signage, and different committees like that. But you end up on all the committees or helping out or somebody else. So you end up doubling your own work in the end. But it's just to make sure that we're moving ahead, and we've digitized everything in our museum now. And we're busy putting up historical signs throughout the community now too. And what else have we been doing? Started house ceilidhs to try and bring back the old style house ceilidh. And started off with just all Gaelic ceilidhs. We have jam sessions throughout the winter months to try and keep the community alive during the winter. It's busy during the summer with tours and that, but we're on our own in the winter, and just to keep the music and everything alive and give people an opportunity to go out, because the local pub is closed, and the local pub, of course, promotes the music, also has music every day pretty well. So we kind of try to fill in a little bit there, just a tiny bit. So we're open to everything. We had talks on the Japanese internment camps. We had the granddaughter of one of them working for us. So it's not all Gaelic. We're trying to bring in, like I said, all the different cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. A real community hub then. And so you just mentioned the pub there. So anyone who knows about the music of Cape Breton will have heard of the Rankin family, who themselves are from Mabou. So they've had huge success with quadruple platinum albums, top 40 singles, many awards. So I believe it's a number of the Rankin sisters who went on to open the Red Shoe pub. So that was 2005. So it's absolutely listed on anything I could find to do with Nova Scotia and Cape Breton as one of the top tourist destinations. So during the summer, it's got live music 7 nights a week. So I imagine that's another real community for sort of hub, and, like you say, a way to kind of share the story of Mabou through the music.
Yes, they actually purchased it from somebody who owned it ahead of them, who had started this music within the Red Shoe, and it's certainly become a hub there for music. And like you said, everybody has heard of the Red Shoe pub, and unfortunately it closes right after Celtic Colours Festival, so all winter there's nothing. So it would be nice to have it open year round, but it's difficult when because it really shuts down around here after the tourist season because of all the snow and ice that does come later on.
Real harsh winters there, I can imagine.
Well, there can be, and sometimes they're not too bad though.
Yeah,
but you can be prepared for. You wouldn't want to go around the Cabot Trail.
No, no, I can imagine. Yeah. And so you just mentioned the Cabot Trail there. And so Mabou's actually part of the Ceilidh Trail. So filled with little places, just like Mabou, that are, you know, full of character. And so the trail actually starts just as you arrive on Cape Breton. So once you come over the causeway, if you follow Route 19 on your left, then, you know, that's you onto the Ceilidh Trail. So it's about 100 kilometres long. And so when was it that that sort of trail was created, and has that helped kind of shine a light on Mabou and the museum?
Yeah, it kind of started around the same time as the Mabou Gaelic Historical Society back in 1975 to 1975 and 80. There was talk of, you know, trying to promote tourism in the area, and then they came up with the idea of the Ceilidh Trail.
Yeah.
So it really was for promoting the area and bringing tourists in and make sure that they didn't just cross the island and totally miss this beautiful part of Cape Breton, bypasses and go through to the deck and down the Cabot Trail and back off the island. So it was a way to try and attract people to come down the west coast. And it's beautiful because you come down beside the Northumberland Strait. You're by the water for a good portion of it. And then you're in and out of harbours. And so it's really worth stopping by the Ceilidh Trail. And along the Ceilidh Trail, most of the settlers along the trail from Scotland came from Lochaber, South Uist, Barra, Rameg, Canna, Muck, Iranshona, just different parts, Maurer, Arasig. So that's kind of the part of Scotland that's represented as you come up the trail, coming Judic, Porthood, Mabou, Inverness, all the way to Margaree. So it's full of descendants of the Gaels from those areas of Scotland.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, you know, from many of those islands have always been surrounded by water. So to have ended up coming to another island and again looking for that kind of coastal area, it's just interesting that there are those kind of, I guess maybe that helped people feel like they were at home, I suppose. So
as close to home as they could be by the water.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so do you get many opportunities to return to the Hebrides then?
Well, yes, I've been fortunate since I retired, especially I've been able to return a number of times. COVID, of course, put a stop to that. So I went 3 years without a trip. So I just made it back in September for a couple of weeks.
Oh, fantastic.
So it was nice to see everybody again and see the place.
Yeah.
Home.
Yeah, and so what is it that you look forward to most when you do get to make those journeys back?
Seeing everybody, seeing family and friends who I haven't seen for years, and I just love walking the hills and the beaches, just being out in the fresh air and walking around the island, doing my daily walk through the hills and shores. And I just love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, nowhere like home, is there? So.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. And so we, of course, love all things clan and tartan. So we have to ask, you know, what your own clan connection is, and if you've got a favourite tartan, whether it be your clan tartan or something completely different.
Yeah. Well, my people were McDonald's on my father's side and on my mother's side, actually, although her father was a McKinnon. So I've got McDonald McKinnon on my mother's side, and I've got McDonald and Mackenzie on my father's side, and of course others too in there, McIntyres I mentioned before. Tartans that I like the dress McDonald, and at this time of year, I tend to think of the maple leaf tartan. I think it's a lovely tartan also. Colors of all the leaves, and right now it's the fall, so the leaves are there. I like the new Eriskay tartan too. They've developed a tartan on the island, so I like that one also.
Oh, I've not seen that one, so I'll have to go and look that one up.
I'll look that one up, yeah. It's a lovely greenish blue tartan, so
brilliant.
Very nice. So, yeah, those are kind of my favorite ones.
Fantastic. Yeah, and of course, Cape Breton and Nova Scotia also have their own tartans too, don't they? So I think that's something really special, not only to see the culture, but you know, it's just everything about Nova Scotia and Cape Breton. Yeah, I mean, I was traveling myself this summer there, and yeah, so many little things that you know you'd heard about, but until you see them all put together, you're like, wow, okay, it is really strong, kind of that heritage over there.
Yeah, Mabou also has its own tartan. So, and some of the other communities around here have their own tartans
really?
too. So,
Okay. Yeah.
there's a lot of weavers around here too, spinners and weavers. They've kept up traditions too.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me and telling me more about, you know, your journey that led you to Mabou and, you know, all of the things people can expect to see there. So I hope that this encourages more people to come and visit the museum next summer. So for anyone that does want to come, how can they find you online, and where would they go to find out more information?
well, they can just Google us for starters, and we have a Facebook site also, Mabou Gaelic Historical Society, and the same for Ndrochach, the museum. That's one too. So you can search us anyway like that, or just come to the community and ask for the Gaelic teachers, and you'll find your way. Somebody will send you to myself or one of the other teachers.
Fantastic.
So we've had lots of people lined at our doors that way.
Oh, really?
Yes, indeed. Over the years, we've lots and lots of visitors. They just come to the community and ask, do you know where the Gaelic teachers are? So
fantastic.
Somebody lands at the door that you've never met before, but that's all right. They can come in and have a cup of tea with us.
Oh, well, it sounds very Scottish hospitality there. So a cup of tea, can't go wrong with that.
Can't go wrong with that. No.
No. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And like I say, hopefully lots of people can come and ask for the teachers in the future.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you're welcome.